The knock came late enough that it felt wrong. Not loud, not angry, just firm, careful, like whoever was on the other side already believed they had a right to be there. I was sitting on my couch with my feet tucked under me, wrapped in my old chenille blanket, the one that smells faintly like lavender and dust and time. The TV was on low, some late-night cooking show I wasn't really watching. My glasses were off. My hair was wrapped. I was comfortable in the quiet way only a woman who knows her own house can be. That knock cut straight through it. I didn't move at first. At my age, you learn the difference between urgency and danger. This didn't sound like trouble. It sounded official. The knock came again. I sighed, stood up slowly, and padded toward the door in my socks. The hallway light flickered like it always does. Been meaning to fix that for years, and I caught my reflection in the mirror by the coat rack. 72 years old, standing straight, eyes clear. I opened the door. 2 police officers stood on my porch. The porch light cast them in yellow, rain beating on their jackets like the night had been waiting for this moment too. "Ma'am," the taller one said gently, "are you Lillian Brooks?" "Yes," I said. "What's wrong?" They looked at each other for a half-second too long. "Your daughter reported you missing." I blinked once, then I laughed, just a small breath of a laugh. "Missing from where?" The shorter officer cleared her throat. "She said you left your home earlier today and didn't return. She was concerned for your safety." I stepped back and gestured around me. "Well, unless my house moved without telling me, I've been right here." Silence. The taller officer glanced down at his notes. "She also said you may be suffering from memory issues." There it was, that quiet word people use when they're trying not to accuse you of disappearing, memory issues. I looked down at myself, house slippers, pajama pants with little blue flowers, my college sweatshirt from the 90s. I looked back up at them and said calmly, "I don't have memory issues." Another pause. "Ma'am," the officer said, softer now, "would you mind if we stepped inside just to make sure everything's okay?" I opened the door wider. "Come on in," I said. "I'll make some tea if you want proof I know how a stove works." They stepped inside. And as they took in my home, the clean counters, the neatly stacked mail, the calendar on the wall with tomorrow already circled, I felt something shift in my chest. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. Because I suddenly understood something important. This knock wasn't about concern, it was about control. And whoever sent it thought I wouldn't see it coming. The officers stood in my living room like guests who didn't know whether to sit or stay standing. I didn't rush them. That's the thing about getting older, you stop performing calm, you just are calm. I walked past them into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and let the soft click of the flame fill the space. The taller officer watched my hands like he expected them to shake or forget what came next. They didn't. "You live here alone, Miss Brooks?" the woman asked. "Been alone here 12 years, I said. "Been living in this house 38. I reached into the cabinet without looking and pulled down 3 mugs, one chipped, one too big, one just right. Muscle memory doesn't lie. I slid the calendar off the fridge magnet and handed it to them, neat handwriting, appointments, church notes. "A reminder to water the plants on Friday." "You keep a calendar," the woman said. "I keep a life," I replied. They exchanged another look, this one quieter, less official. The man cleared his throat. "Your daughter sounded worried." I smiled at that, not warm, not cold, just aware. "My daughter sounds worried when she wants something." That landed heavier than I meant it to. I opened a drawer and pulled out my medication organizer, days labeled. Slots empty where they should be empty, full where tomorrow waited. "Taken on time," I said. "Same as always." The woman officer nodded slowly. "You seem very put together." "That's because I am." There was a beat. Then the man asked gently, "Do you know why your daughter might think otherwise?" I didn't answer right away. The kettle whistled. I turned it off, poured the water, watched the steam rise like a thought I'd been avoiding. "She's been asking questions lately," I said finally. "The kind that pretend to be concerned." "What kind of questions?" the woman asked. "What day is it? Did you eat? Do you remember what we talked about last week?" I stirred my tea. Questions meant to leave a paper trail. That got their attention. I walked to the side table by the window and picked up an envelope. Thick. Legal looking, the kind of paper that wants to scare you before you even open it. "I found this yesterday," I said, handing it over. The man opened it. His jaw tightened. "Petition for guardianship," he read quietly. The room changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "She filed this before calling you?" the woman asked. 3 days before, I said, left it in my mailbox like a warning. The man exhaled through his nose. That explains the report. I leaned against the counter. Go ahead, I said. Say it. He hesitated. Ma'am, this feels like an attempt to establish incompetence. Feels like it because it is. The woman took out her phone. Would you like us to call her? Let her know you've been found. Yes, I said. Put it on speaker. The phone rang once, twice. Hello, my daughter said, breathy, urgent, practiced. This is Officer Reyes, the woman said. We're with your mother. She's at home, she's fine. Silence, then, oh well, she must be having a good moment. I stepped forward and took the phone. There it is, I said calmly, the lie you practiced. Her voice sharpened. Mom, give the phone back. You're confused. No, I said, I'm finished being polite. The officers watched us like witnesses who already knew the truth. You don't get to erase me because it's convenient, I said. And you don't get to borrow the law to do it. She hung up. The house went quiet again. The man closed his notebook. Ma'am, he said, we'll be documenting this as a false report. I nodded, not in relief, in resolve. Because this wasn't over, it was just finally visible. After the officers left, the house felt louder than it should have. Not noisy, just alert, like the walls had leaned in and were waiting to see what I'd do next. I stood at the door for a long moment after it closed, my hand still on the knob. Then I locked it, not because I was scared, because I was done assuming family meant safety. I went back to the living room and sat where I'd been before the knock. The blanket was still folded just how I left it. The tea had gone untouched, steam curling up like it was trying to whisper something important. I didn't drink it. Instead, I reached for the envelope again. I spread the papers across my coffee table, smoothing them flat the way my mother used to smooth church programs. Slowly, carefully, respectfully, like paper deserves attention. Her handwriting wasn't on them, a lawyer's was. Words jumped out at me like accusations dressed up as care. Declining cognitive ability, poor judgment, risk to personal safety. I read every line, then I read them again. What hurt wasn't the lies, it was how familiar they sounded. For months now, she'd been saying things sideways, not directly, just enough to make me second-guess the room. You sure you locked the door, Mom? You already told me that, didn't you? You're still driving, brave. At first, I thought she was just being her. Now I saw the pattern. She wasn't checking on me, she was collecting moments. I stood up and went to my desk, the small one by the window where I pay bills and write birthday cards. I opened the drawer and pulled out my checkbook. Balanced. Receipts tucked neatly behind the register, then my file folder, taxes. Bank statements, insurance, all labeled in my handwriting. I laughed, a short, dry sound. If I was confused, I was the most organized, confused woman she'd ever meet. I picked up my phone and called my son. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Mama, everything okay? No, I said, but it's about to be. I told him everything, the knock, the report, the papers, the lie she said on speaker. He went quiet, too quiet. She did what? He finally asked. I think she thought I wouldn't fight, I said, or wouldn't understand. That's not how you raised us. No, I said softly, but fear makes people forget. The next morning I made appointments. Not because I needed help, but because I needed proof. A doctor, a lawyer, a paper trail that told the truth louder than her whispers. By noon, my dining table looked like a courtroom. Files, calendars, letters. Evidence of a life lived intentionally. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fast. This was colder. This was clarity. I realized something sitting there alone with my documents spread out like a map. She didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as a problem to solve, and problems in her world get managed. I folded the papers back into their envelope and wrote one word on the front in bold ink. No. Then I placed it by the door, not for her, for me. Because the next time someone knocked on that door, I wouldn't be explaining who I was, I'd be defending it. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. I noticed things like that when I was nervous. Miss Caldwell didn't rush me. That told me everything I needed to know about her before she ever opened my file. She was a black woman in her late 50s, silver threaded through her locks, glasses hanging from a chain like punctuation. She listened with her whole face, no tapping, no sighing, no interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and folded her hands. This isn't concern, she said plainly. This is strategy. The words settled heavy in my chest. She's trying to establish a narrative, Miss Caldwell continued. That you're declining. Once that narrative exists, facts become optional, I nodded. That's why she went to the police. Exactly, official contact creates a record. Even a false one can be used later if it's not challenged. I felt something tighten in my stomach. So what do we do? She smiled, slow and steady. We outdocument her. That afternoon, I sat through a full cognitive evaluation. Memory tests, logic puzzles, timelines, conversations that circled back on themselves just to see if I'd catch it. I did. The doctor's pen moved quickly, not from concern, more like admiration. You're sharp, he said. Very. Tell that to my daughter, I replied. He didn't laugh, he just nodded. By the end of the week, I had paperwork thick enough to stop a door, medical assessments, financial summaries. Letters from my pastor, my neighbor, the woman I volunteer with on Tuesdays. People who knew me, not the version she'd been describing. Meanwhile, the calls started, voicemails full of sweetness. Mom, I'm just worried. Why are you doing all this? You don't have to make things hard. I didn't answer because I'd learned something important. When someone insists they're helping while ignoring your voice, that's not help, that's rehearsal. The hearing was set for the following month. She'd asked the court to decide if I could manage my own life. The audacity of it would have been funny if it hadn't been so close to succeeding. The night before the hearing, I stood in my bedroom folding laundry. Simple things calm me, each shirt stacked clean, each sock paired, evidence again. I caught my reflection in the mirror, same woman who raised 2 children. Same woman who buried a husband and still paid every bill on time, same woman who built a life without asking permission. I straightened my shoulders, let her bring her story, I had the truth. And tomorrow, I was going to say it out loud. Courthouses have their own kind of silence, not peaceful, not respectful, just heavy. Like the walls have heard too many versions of the truth and learned not to react. I sat on the wooden bench with my purse on my lap, hands folded the way my mother taught me, calm on the outside, ready on the inside. My son sat beside me, knee bouncing despite himself. He was trying to stay composed for me, and I loved him for that. Across the room, my daughter sat with her attorney. She wouldn't look at me. That told me everything. When the judge entered, we all stood. The room shifted, papers straightened. Breaths held. The judge was a woman with tired eyes and a voice that didn't waste words. She'd seen this before. I could tell by how quickly she moved through the formalities. My daughter's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture, a mother fading. A daughter burdened with worry, a home that was no longer safe. He used phrases like best interest and protective measures. He said my name like it belonged to someone else. Then he mentioned the police report. That was his anchor. I felt my son stiffen beside me. When it was our turn, Miss Caldwell stood slowly, confident, unrushed. Your Honor, she said, every claim you just heard is unsupported by fact. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. She laid the documents out one by one like cards in a winning hand. Medical evaluations, financial records, letters from professionals and community members, proof of a functioning, thinking, capable woman. Then she addressed the report. The missing person report, she said, was false. Officers found Miss Brooks at home, alert, oriented, and clearly not missing. We are submitting their written observations. The judge's eyebrow lifted. She looked at me. Miss Brooks, she said, I'd like to hear from you. I stood. My legs felt steady. My voice did too. I manage my own life, I said. I always have. I pay my bills. I cook my meals. I show up where I'm supposed to be. I paused. My daughter didn't ask me if I needed help, I continued. She decided I did, and when I didn't agree, she tried to make the world believe I couldn't speak for myself. The room was quiet now, not courtroom quiet. Listening quiet, the judge nodded slowly, then turned to my daughter. Miss Harris, she said, do you have any medical evidence that your mother is impaired? My daughter opened her mouth, closed it. No, she said finally. The judge sighed. This petition is denied. The words landed like a door slamming shut on a lie, but as relief washed through me, I understood something deeper. This wasn't over, because losing control doesn't always end a fight. Sometimes it just changes the tactics. And as I sat back down, I saw it in my daughter's eyes for the first time, not regret, calculation. People think losing in court humbles you. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just teaches you where the edges are. The weeks after the hearing were quiet in a way that made my skin itch. No calls, no surprise visits. No, just checking in messages. At first, I enjoyed it. Peace feels like a reward when you've been bracing for impact, but then the little things started. My bank called to verify unusual inquiries. My pharmacy asked if someone else was authorized to pick up my prescriptions. A neighbor mentioned casually that my daughter had asked if I'd been doing okay lately. None of it illegal, all of it intentional. She was probing, seeing where she could still reach without leaving fingerprints. Miss Caldwell warned me about this. When formal control fails, she said, some people pivot to pressure. Pressure looks polite from the outside. Pressure sounds like care, but it's meant to wear you down. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find a note taped to my door. Mom, we should really talk. This doesn't have to be hard. I stood there with my keys still in my hand, staring at her handwriting. Same loops. Same slant, same way she dotted her I's like she was trying too hard. I took the note down and folded it once, not to save it, to document it. That night I sat at my kitchen table and started a log, dates, times, who called. Who asked what, every question that felt less like concern and more like inventory. I wrote calmly, neatly, like I was preparing for a future conversation I hoped I wouldn't have to have. A week later she showed up, no warning. Just rang the bell like she still belonged to the version of me that opened doors without checking first. I didn't open it. Mom, she called through the door, I know you're in there. I know, I said back. That's why I'm not opening it. Silence, then her voice softened. I just want to help you. I leaned my forehead against the door. Helping starts with listening. You're being stubborn. No, I said. I'm being clear, she exhaled sharply. Everyone says you're different lately. That stopped me. Different how? I asked. Guarded, defensive, not yourself. I laughed then, a real laugh. I am exactly myself. You're just not used to me setting boundaries. Another silence. Then quiet, sharp, almost honest. You're making this difficult. There it was, not I'm worried, not I love you, just inconvenience. I straightened up. This conversation is over. I walked away from the door, heart steady, hands sure. That night I updated my legal documents, changed who was listed, added restrictions, closed every door she'd once assumed was unlocked. I didn't do it out of spite, I did it out of survival. Because when someone shows you they're willing to erase you for access, you believe them, and you protect yourself accordingly. I started hearing my name in rooms I wasn't in. Not directly, not loudly, just enough to know it was happening. A woman from church pulled me aside one Sunday and asked if I was feeling okay these days. The librarian I volunteer with asked too casually if I still wanted to handle the computer signups on my own. Even my cousin called and said, your daughter's just worried, baby, you know how kids get. I did know, they get persuasive. What my daughter couldn't get from the court, she tried to get from the crowd. She told a softer version of the lie this time. No police, no papers, just concern sprinkled into conversation like seasoning. She forgets sometimes. She's proud, you know how she is. I'm just trying to help before something bad happens. It was smart. Because doubt spreads faster than truth when it's wrapped in love. I didn't confront her. I documented. I asked people to put things in writing when they mentioned her concerns. I followed up conversations with emails that summarized what was said. I stayed visible, volunteering, attending meetings, showing up exactly as myself. I refused to disappear quietly. One afternoon, my son came over and found me filing papers at the dining table. You okay, Mama? He asked. I'm fine, I said. I'm building a fence. He frowned. Against her? Against confusion, I replied. Against anyone who decides my life for me. He sat down across from me and shook his head slowly. I don't recognize her anymore. I stacked the folders neatly. Neither do I. That night I lay in bed thinking about how strange betrayal feels when it comes wrapped in familiarity. How the same voice that once called you Mama can start calling you incapable without changing tone. What scared me wasn't what she'd done, it was how easily people believed it. Age does that. It makes the world assume you're already halfway gone. I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. If she was telling a story about me, I was going to make sure mine was louder, because silence is what people use to erase you. And I wasn't ready to go quiet, not yet. I didn't plan to become that woman, the one who speaks up, the one who corrects people mid-sentence, the one who brings receipts to conversations that used to run on trust. But here's the thing about being pushed into a corner: you either shrink or you straighten your spine. I straightened. It started small. When someone said, "Your daughter mentioned you've been forgetting things," I smiled and replied, "That's interesting, my doctor says the opposite." Want to see the report? When someone asked if I was still managing okay, I said, "I am, and I document it." Not defensive, not angry, just factual. Facts make liars uncomfortable. Word traveled faster than I expected. Not the gossip, my clarity. People started noticing that I was still running meetings, still balancing budgets, still remembering birthdays better than most folks half my age. The narrative she'd been building began to crack under the weight of my continued presence. That's when the letter came, certified mail. My hands didn't shake when I signed for it. Inside was a formal request, polite, legal, sharp-edged. She was asking for mediation, not reconciliation, mediation, as if our relationship had become a dispute over property lines. I took the letter to Miss Caldwell. She read it once, then again. "She's trying to regain leverage," she said. "Mediation creates the appearance of reasonableness." "Is it a trap?" I asked. "It's a test," she replied, "to see if you'll compromise out of exhaustion." I laughed softly. She picked the wrong motivation. We declined, formally, cleanly, with language that left no room for reinterpretation. After that, things escalated quietly. A complaint to adult services closed quickly after a visit and a review of my records. A suggestion to my bank flagged and dismissed. A request for access to my medical portal denied. Each attempt failed, and with each failure something changed, not in her, in me. I stopped waiting for the next shoe to drop. I started sleeping better, because once you realize someone can't actually take your power unless you hand it over, the fear loosens its grip. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sun dip low and slow, my neighbor asked gently, "You doing okay, Miss Brooks?" I smiled. "Real this time?" "I am," I said. "I know who I am." And that's when I understood the real cost of what she tried to do. She didn't just try to control my future. She tried to rewrite my present, but I was still here, still speaking. Still deciding, and there was one more thing left to do, something I hadn't planned but felt necessary. If she was willing to use systems meant to protect people as weapons, then I was going to make sure those systems knew the truth. I didn't go public out of anger, I went public out of precision. There's a difference. Anger wants to burn everything down, precision wants to leave a mark that can't be ignored. Miss Caldwell helped me file a formal complaint not against my daughter as a daughter but against her actions as an accuser. False claims, patterned behavior, documented attempts to establish incompetence without evidence. Paperwork again, always paperwork. I met with a social services supervisor, a woman younger than my daughter who listened carefully as I laid out my timeline, dates, reports, outcomes, every attempt that failed because it wasn't true. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said quietly, "Thank you for bringing this forward." "For what?" I asked. "So the next time she tries this with you or with someone else, there's context." That word stayed with me, context. Because lies thrive in isolation, truth needs history. A month later, I was invited to speak at a small community meeting about elder rights. Just a handful of people in folding chairs, coffee in paper cups, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I didn't dramatize anything, I told it plain. I wasn't confused, I said, I was targeted. Heads nodded, not in shock, in recognition. Afterward, people stayed behind to talk. One woman whispered that her son had been asking questions lately. A man admitted his niece kept pushing him to sign things he didn't understand. I realized then this wasn't rare, it was quiet. And quiet things spread when nobody names them. That night I went home and sat in my living room again, the same spot where the knock had come weeks before. The blanket, the lamp, the hum of the refrigerator down the hall, everything the same. Everything different. My daughter stopped calling after that, not because she understood, because she knew there was a record now, a trail that didn't rely on charm or concern or performance. I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled. There's a peace that comes from knowing you stood up without becoming cruel, from defending yourself without losing yourself. I turned off the light and sat in the dark for a moment longer than usual, still here, still capable, still mine. And tomorrow, like every day after that, I would wake up and live my life on my own terms. Quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. Time didn't fix anything, it clarified it. Weeks passed, then months. The tension thinned out like fog lifting slow enough that you don't notice until the air feels lighter. My phone stayed quiet. My mailbox returned to bills and grocery flyers, no more certified letters. No more surprise check-ins disguised as concern. People stopped asking if I was okay. They started asking how I was doing. That difference matters. I kept my routines: morning tea by the window, Tuesdays at the community center, Thursdays with my book club, arguing about characters like they were real people who owed us explanations. Life didn't get bigger, it got steadier. One evening, my son sat across from me at the kitchen table while I chopped vegetables for soup. "You ever think about forgiving her?" he asked carefully. I didn't stop chopping. "I think about peace," I said. "Forgiveness might come later or it might not. Either way, my peace doesn't depend on her understanding." He nodded. "That's fair." I thought about my daughter sometimes, not with anger, not even with sadness, more like distance, like thinking about a road you don't take anymore. I learned something through all of this, something nobody teaches you outright. Aging doesn't make you invisible, it just makes some people think they can speak over you, and the most radical thing you can do at this stage of life is stay present, stay documented. Stay loud when it counts and quiet when it doesn't. On a Sunday afternoon, I sat on my porch watching the light shift across the street. Children laughed somewhere down the block. A neighbor waved. The world kept moving, unconcerned with the storm that had passed through my living room months ago. That felt right. I wasn't a cautionary tale. I wasn't a victim. I was a woman who noticed what was happening and refused to disappear politely. The house knew my name, so did the truth, and that was enough. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, even for a second, then it was meant for you. Some stories don't shout, they sit beside you. They remind you that age doesn't erase truth, and family doesn't get to rewrite your life. If you believe every voice deserves to be heard, especially the ones people try to quiet, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. And before you go, tell us in the comments, backhand index pointing right, what would you do if someone tried to decide your life without asking you? We read every comment, we listen. Thank you for sitting with this story. Until next time, stay present, stay strong, and don't let anyone tell your story for you.